Imagine this. You finally left a relationship that has terrorized you for years. You've moved out. You've changed where you live. You've tried avoiding your abuser. You've even taken time away from work just to escape. Then one evening, you're walking home with friends in one of Nairobi's busiest neighborhoods. People are everywhere. Cars are passing. Businesses are open. You're surrounded by witnesses. And somehow, those are the final moments of your life. Because the one person you've been trying to escape has decided that if he can't have you, nobody will. This is a story of 25-year-old Ann Keya Ahuna. And this is Crime Dopers.
Twisted tales in every folder. Truth runs hot while the trail gets colder. Crime Dopers. We don't look away.
Hey Crime Dopers, I'm Wanja. Thank you for joining me for another episode. Before we begin, I want to give a brief warning. Today's story involves domestic violence, stalking, and femicide. At Crime Dopers, we believe every victim deserves to be remembered as a person first, not as a headline. And Ann Keya Ahuna was more than just a news story. She was a daughter, a student, a colleague, a friend, a young woman with dreams. But on the evening of May 14th, 2026, her future was stolen in one of the most shocking acts of intimate partner violence Kenya has ever witnessed this year. As we move through this story, keep one question in mind. How many warning signs can exist before tragedy finally strikes? Because in Ann's case, the signs were everywhere. Now, let's get into today's case. To understand what happened that evening in Kilimani, we have to go back. Not days, not weeks, years. Ann Keya Ahuna was 25 years old. She worked for a money lending company located along Gong Road. She was also pursuing her studies while working. People who knew her describe a hard-working young woman trying to build a future. But for more than 2 years, Ann was trapped in a toxic relationship. The man at the center of this story was 22-year-old Newton Ambei, an IT specialist. Ironically, he worked at the same company as Ann. At first glance, it may have looked like a normal workplace romance, but according to family accounts, things had become increasingly dangerous. The relationship was reportedly marked by conflict, control, threats, and intimidation. At one point, the couple lived together in Kerugoya, and this is where one of the most chilling details emerges. Family members later alleged that Newton had previously threatened Ann with a knife. Think about that. A knife, not a heated argument, not a vague threat, a weapon. Now ask yourself, if someone threatens your life once, how seriously should that be taken? Because in hindsight, this detail feels impossible to ignore. According to reports, Ann eventually reached her breaking point. She left. She moved away. She relocated to Kawangware and stayed with her aunt. She was trying to start over, trying to survive, trying to create distance, and perhaps most tellingly, she even stepped away from work for a period of time to avoid him. That alone tells us how serious the situation had become. But despite all her efforts, one problem remained. They still worked at the same company. And sometimes, even when a relationship ends, the danger doesn't. Sometimes, that's where it begins.
Ani ameishi Kirinyaga, alikuwa anafanya kazi huko ndio walipatana na huyu kijana. Huyu kijana hata huko Kerugoya alitaka kumuua. Ani akuniambia amerudi Nairobi. Vile walikosana, kijana akachukua namba yangu. Vile tu alikuwa anafanyaga Kirinyaga, akanipigia simu.
Thursday, May 14th, 2026. For Ann Keya Ahuna, it probably began like any other day. The alarm goes off. You get ready for work. You think about deadlines, customers, bills, school, family. Normal things. The kind of things every young person thinks about while trying to build a life. Ann arrived at the money lending company along Gong Road where she worked. A place she knew well. A place she should have felt safe. A place that, by the end of the day, will become the starting point of a tragedy. Because according to investigators, someone else arrived at work that morning carrying something more than office responsibilities: a knife. Police will later state that evidence suggested Newton Ambei arrived at the workplace already armed. And if that's true, it changes how we understand everything that happened next. Because this wasn't a weapon picked up during an argument, no. It wasn't something grabbed in a moment of rage. It was allegedly brought there, carried there, hidden there. Now, you have to ask yourself, why bring a knife to work? It's a question investigators will later focus on heavily. As the morning progressed, colleagues reportedly noticed the tension that existed between Ann and Newton. This wasn't a secret. The relationship had already ended. People around them knew things weren't good. Management knew things weren't good. In fact, the situation had become serious enough that management decided to intervene.
At first, venye Ann alijoin, they were very close. Nikimuuliza, are you a couple? Akaniambia hapana, we are cousins. Alituambia Newton alikuwa anampiga, Newton anachukua pesa zake, alikuwa na M-Pesa pin na bank pin, hizo vitu zote. Na Newton analewa sana na pesa zake. Sasa hiyo ndio kitu ilimuudhi, na before atoke kwa hiyo nyumba aende penye alikuwa anaenda, Newton alikuwa ameshamshikia kisu kwa nyumba. So she left. At 5, the management wakalita Ann na Ambei wakatoka nje. So kulikuwa na commotion huko nje. Kidogo kidogo madam akakuja akaita some 3 boys watoe Newton nje. Sasa hiyo story kaisha hapo 6:30.
And this detail breaks my heart because it means people were trying. They saw a problem, they recognized conflict, and they attempted to fix it before things spiraled further. Sometime that afternoon, an internal mediation meeting was organized. Ann was there. Newton was there. Management was there. Imagine being in that room. The tension, the discomfort, the exhaustion. Perhaps Ann had already explained herself countless times. Perhaps she just wanted peace. Perhaps she simply wanted to move on. But according to reports, the mediation didn't go well. Accounts indicate that Newton became difficult during the discussions. The effort to reconcile the differences ultimately failed. And when the meeting ended, everyone returned to work. At least physically. But emotionally, something had shifted. The clock continued ticking. Minutes became hours. The workday slowly came to an end. Outside, Nairobi carried on as usual. Traffic clogged the roads. Matatus blasted music. Street vendors served customers. People hurried home. Nothing suggested that within a short time, another woman will become a victim of intimate partner violence. As closing time approached, Ann gathered her things. Maybe she was relieved the day was over. Maybe she was looking forward to seeing family. Maybe she wasn't thinking about school. We'll never know. What we do know is this, that she didn't leave alone. She exited the workplace alongside colleagues. Safety in numbers. Or at least, that's what most of us would assume. The group began walking towards Agwing's Kothek Road, a routine journey, one they had likely taken many times before. But someone was watching, someone was following, someone who had reportedly spent the entire day in the same building. According to investigators, Newton began trailing the group from behind. At first, it may not have seemed unusual. After all, they all worked at the same place. Maybe they happened to be heading in the same direction. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But then something changed, because at some point, Ann realized this wasn't a coincidence. This was pursuit. And from that moment onward, every second mattered. The question is, did she really fear what might happen? Had previous threats taught her to recognize danger before anyone else could? Because what happened next suggests she knew she needed to get away. Fast. Very fast. And that's when an ordinary walk home became a desperate attempt to survive.
We left work. So mi kurudisha simu kwa bag ndo naona Newton na kisu akikuja mbio. So ndo nikatag Ann kumsukuma tukimbie nikipiga nduru nikiscream. Sasa kwenda hivi kuna gari ilituzuia kidogo mimi nikaanguka. Nikaamka I ran to the other side Ann akakimbia the other side of the pharmacy. Sasa nikaona watu wamejaa. I was actually relieved nikifikiria hakuna kitu imefanya. Kidogo ndo nikaona Ann anatoka na damu kwa nguo na akaanguka.
There are moments in some cases when everything changes. Moments that in hindsight become impossible to forget. For Ann Keya Ahuna, that moment came when she realized she wasn't simply walking home. She was being followed. The workday was over. The tension of the failed mediation meeting was right behind her. Or at least, she hoped it was. Like many young professionals in Nairobi, she was making her way through the evening rush. Cars crawled through traffic. People moved between shops. Matatus blared music from open windows. The city was alive, busy, crowded, normal. And yet, hidden within that normalcy was a danger Ann knew all too well. According to investigators, Newton had left the workplace behind her. He was following, not leading, not walking beside her. Following. And this wasn't the first time Ann had felt unsafe around him. Remember? This was a relationship that had reportedly been marked by threats and intimidation. A relationship she had already tried to escape. A relationship she had left behind. So when she noticed him behind her, she may have immediately understood something others around her didn't. Danger. Real danger. Now imagine yourself in her position. You look over your shoulder. The person you've been trying to avoid is still there. You keep walking. They're still there. You change pace. They're still there. What will be going through your mind? Fear? Panic? Disbelief? Maybe all three? Investigators later revealed that CCTV footage captured key moments of what happened next. And according to reports, Ann wasn't moving toward him. She was moving away from him, trying to create distance, trying to get somewhere safe, trying to survive. The footage reportedly shows a pursuit stretching hundreds of meters along Kirichwa Road. That detail matters because it tells us this wasn't a brief disagreement. This wasn't a spontaneous confrontation. This was a chase, a terrifying chase through one of Nairobi's busiest neighborhoods. As the distance between them closed, Ann made a decision. She ran. Think about how frightening a situation has to be before you start running in public. Most people don't run unless they believe something terrible is about to happen. Ann believed that, and tragically, she was right. Witnesses will later describe scenes of panic. A young woman desperately trying to escape, a man refusing to stop following her, the city moving around them, unaware of the horror that was unfolding in real time. And this is one of the hardest parts of the story, because Ann did exactly what many safety experts advise. She ran toward people, toward businesses, toward potential help. She didn't isolate herself. She didn't hide in an empty alley. She moved toward what we presume as safety, or what should have been safety. As she fled, she spotted a nearby pharmacy, a place filled with people, employees, customers, witnesses, a place where she likely believed she could find protection. And honestly, most of us will think the same thing. If you're being chased, where do you go? Somewhere public, somewhere visible, somewhere where others can intervene. The pharmacy seemed like exactly that. So Ann rushed inside. For a brief moment, perhaps, she believed she had made it. Perhaps she thought the worst was over. Maybe she hoped the presence of other people would stop what was coming. Maybe she believed witnesses would be enough. But what happened next would leave an entire nation shaken. According to investigators, Newton followed her into the pharmacy. The pursuit didn't end outside. It continued inside. The very place where Ann sought refuge became the scene of unimaginable violence. Witnesses suddenly found themselves in the middle of a nightmare, a place where people normally pick up medicine, a place associated with healing, a place associated with help, instead became a crime scene. Reports indicate that Newton cornered Ann inside the pharmacy. There was nowhere left to run, no escape route, no way out. And then the attack began. Investigators say Ann was stabbed multiple times. The violence was swift, brutal, and devastating. Customers screamed. People rushed to intervene. Confusion erupted. Panic spread through the business. In seconds, ordinary people found themselves witnessing something they will never likely forget. Now, here's the detail that still haunts me. Even after suffering those injuries, reports indicate Ann managed to leave the pharmacy. She stumbled back outside, injured, bleeding, fighting with every remaining ounce of strength she had. Just picture that. A young woman refusing to give up, refusing to stop fighting for her life, trying to reach help, trying to stay alive, trying to survive. But her injuries were catastrophic. Moments later, she collapsed. And despite the presence of witnesses, despite the efforts of those nearby, despite the fact that she had done everything possible to escape, her life was slipping away. The very thing she had feared for so long had finally caught up with her. And perhaps the most chilling part of all this, the attack happened in public, not behind closed doors, not in secrecy, not in isolation. It happened in front of witnesses, in a busy neighborhood, in broad daylight, which forces us to confront a difficult truth. Domestic violence is often imagined as something private, something that stays inside homes, something that remains hidden, but sometimes it spills into workplaces, onto streets, into businesses, into communities, into the lives of everyone around it. And on that evening in Kilimani, dozens of people became witnesses to the final moments of a young woman who had spent years trying to escape the danger that ultimately found her. The mystery was no longer whether Ann was in danger. The mystery now became this: could anyone have stopped what happened before it reached this point? In many true crime cases, the suspect disappears. They run, they hide, they spend days, weeks, sometimes years avoiding accountability. That wasn't the case here, because what happened after the attack is just as remarkable as it is heartbreaking. The violence inside the pharmacy unfolded in front of witnesses, real people, people who had left work, people running errands, people buying medicine, people who expected an ordinary evening. Instead, they found themselves in the middle of a nightmare. As panic erupted inside the pharmacy, word spread almost instantly. Customers screamed, employees shouted for help, people outside began gathering, drivers slowed their vehicles, pedestrians stopped in their tracks. Within moments, a crowd had formed. And that's when the suspect allegedly attempted to leave the scene. But this time, something different happened. The public refused to stand by. Now, let's be honest. Most of us like to think we'd know exactly what we'd do during an emergency. But the truth is, when violence erupts unexpectedly, Fear takes over. People freeze. People panic. People run. It's human. Yet on that evening, ordinary citizens chose action. Witnesses and bystanders reportedly rushed toward the suspect, not away from him, toward him. Think about the courage that takes. You don't know if the person is still armed. You don't know if they're dangerous. You don't know if they'll attack again. But people intervened anyway. Reports indicate members of the public managed to overpower and restrain him before he could escape. For a brief period, emotions boiled over. And honestly, that's not difficult to understand. A young woman had just been attacked in front of dozens of people. Many had witnessed her trying to run. Many had watched her desperately seek safety. Many had seen the horror unfold with their own eyes. The anger was immediate, raw, explosive. Now imagine standing there. You've just watched someone fight for their life. You've watched a young woman collapse. You've watched people desperately trying to help. How would you react? It's a question worth asking, because moments like this reveal something about human nature. The same crowd that had been strangers minutes earlier suddenly became connected by a single goal: stop the suspect from getting away. And they succeeded. Police officers from Kilimani police station were alerted and rushed to the scene. By the time they arrived, members of the public had already detained the suspect. He was taken into custody. But for Ann, the situation was very different. As fast responders focused on the scene, attention turned towards saving her life. People nearby attempted to assist. Emergency efforts began. But the injuries were severe, far too severe. And despite those efforts, Ann was pronounced dead. 25 years old. Gone. A daughter would never return home. A sister would never answer another phone call. A friend will never send another message. A colleague will never return to work. In just a matter of minutes, an entire future had disappeared. And as the news of the incident spread across Nairobi, shock quickly turned into grief. People couldn't believe what had happened, not just because of the brutality, but because of where it happened: a public street, a pharmacy, a busy neighborhood, a place filled with people, a place where safety should have existed. As investigators arrived, they immediately began securing the scene. Witnesses were interviewed, statements were collected, evidence was preserved. Every detail mattered, every second mattered, because investigators now had the difficult task of reconstructing exactly what had happened. And almost immediately, troubling details began emerging. The suspect and victim reportedly worked at the same company. There had been a mediation meeting earlier that day. The relationship had a documented history of conflict. Family members would later reveal allegations of prior threats. The more investigators learned, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't a mystery between strangers. This was a tragedy rooted in a relationship that had reportedly been deteriorating for years. Then came another critical development. Detectives recovered the alleged murder weapon, a knife believed to have been used during the attack. Forensic specialists began examining it. DNA testing, fingerprint analysis, evidence preservation. Every piece will become part of the prosecution's case. Meanwhile, investigators turned their attention to surveillance footage, and what they found would become one of the most important pieces of evidence. CCTV cameras had reportedly captured significant portions of the pursuit. The footage allegedly documented Ann trying to escape, trying to get away, trying to find safety. The recordings will later help investigators establish a timeline of events and support claims that the attack was not spontaneous. But perhaps the most devastating discoveries came from the conversations with people who knew Ann: family members, friends, colleagues, people who had witnessed the relationship deteriorate. One by one, stories emerged. Stories of fear, stories of threats, stories of a young woman who had already been trying to protect herself. And suddenly, the tragedy looked even more painful because it wasn't simply about what happened that evening. It was about everything that happened before it. The warnings, the intimidation, the attempts to leave, the efforts to move on, the search for safety. And that's when the public conversation began to shift. People stopped asking only what happened and started asking something much harder. Why did it reach this point? Because by now, Kenya had seen too many similar stories, too many women killed by current or former partners, too many warning signs ignored, too many families left grieving. As news outlets covered the case, social media exploded with outrage. The name Ann Keya Ahuna spread across timelines. Thousands shared tributes. Thousands demanded justice. Thousands saw their own experiences reflected in her story. For some, Ann's case was a headline. For others, it was painfully personal. A reminder of threats they had survived. A reminder of relationships they had escaped. Or perhaps a reminder of loved ones they had already lost. And as the nation mourned, investigators continued building their case. Because while public grief was growing, another process was beginning. The search for justice, the legal battle that will determine accountability. And for Ann's family, that fight was only just beginning. As investigators pieced together the case, several details stood out. The alleged prior knife threat, the separation, the relocation, the workplace tension, the failed mediation, the CCTV footage, the recovered weapon, the reported history of harassment. Individually, each detail is concerning. Together, they tell a story of escalating risk. And that's what makes this case so difficult. Because when people hear the phrase domestic violence, they often imagine private arguments behind closed doors. But domestic violence doesn't stay contained. Sometimes it follows victims to workplaces, to schools, to public streets, to pharmacies, to places where they shall feel safe. Ann's case has reignited conversations about femicide, workplace safety, stalking, and protection systems for survivors. And perhaps the most haunting question remains: what additional intervention might have changed the outcome? We'll never know, but it's a question worth asking again and again.
Like she was really trying to save her life. Kindly naomba tu mtusaidie tupate justice.
Naomba kama nyinyi mliona hizo ma CCTV, kwa sababu huyu msichana wangu alikuwa anapenda huyo kijana, ametoka far away from Kirinyaga, amekuja amemdanganyiriria, amekuja amemtoa Naivasha, amembeba na sikujua. Hiyo Naivasha kama angekuwa kijana wa kumuoa, angemwambia twende kwa mama. Hata mimi ukiniuliza hata saa hizi sijui yani anakaa wapi.
Like she was really trying to save her life. Kindly naomba tu mtusaidie tupate justice. My sister was very kind.
Ann Keya Ahuna was more than a victim. She was a person, a daughter, student, a colleague, a woman trying to rebuild her life, and she deserves to be remembered. As this case moves through the justice system, Crime Dopers will continue following developments. If you have credible information connected to this case, please contact the appropriate authorities or the investigating officers handling the matter. And if you're experiencing domestic violence, stalking, threats, or coercive control, please don't ignore those warning signs. Tell someone, document everything, seek help, reach out, because your safety matters. Before I go, here's today's Crime Dopers life rule: never dismiss repeated threats as just words. Sometimes the most dangerous warning is the one people have heard before. Thank you for listening. I'm Wanja. Stay aware, stay safe, stay alert, and I will see you in the next episode of Crime Dopers.
Crime Dopers. We don't look away.
It is saddened to me that